I'm the last survivor. They pulled me from the rubble. This is the truck that has to be removed to save me. I was right under that black hole that you see over there. I worked in the building for 20 years. I was the person in charge of all the stairwells of the North Tower. I was the person that was a janitor. I was just the person that cleaned the stairwells in the building. And on 9/11, I have the only available master key that opened the whole complex that was used to rescue people. There were 5 master keys. The people with the other 4 master keys worked for the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, who owned the building. Those were trained on egress, escape, first aid, rescue efforts, and they were the first one to run out of the building. This is a master key that saved thousands of lives on 9/11. After that, I was named national hero by President Bush. Became the media expert all over the world for victims, survivors, and those affected of 9/11. I've been at the forefront in the United States of asking not only legislations for victims of crime, but also the person behind the 9/11 Commission. I went to Congress and I asked for an investigation of 9/11. And at that moment, President Bush said, we don't need an investigation because we know who did it. On 9/11, I went into work really late because I was supposed to get there at 8 o'clock in the morning. A miracle by itself, because if I got there at 8 o'clock, every morning I would go straight to Windows of the World, which was the restaurant that was located on the last floor of the North Tower. And since I was cleaning the stairwells, I would go cleaning from the top down. So the plane, when it hit, would have got me all the way on the top. I was at 8:30 in the basement of the North Tower. The building has 6 sub-levels: B1, B2, B3, B4, B5, B6. Those are the 6 sub-levels, sub-basements that the building had. My office was located on the B1 level. That level had the office for the cleaning company, the office for the electricians, and so on. While I was talking to the supervisor, at 8:46 we hear a boom! A huge explosion, an explosion so strong that pushes us upwards, indicative that something happened below me. And at that time, I thought that in the mechanical room, on the B2 level, there was a mechanical room where they have all the pumps, generators for the air conditioners, and the water pumps for the building came from there. That something blew up down there. And it was so powerful that all the walls cracked. The false ceiling fell on top of us. And there was total screaming inside the office. There were 14 people in the office. At that moment, when I went to say, it's a generator that just blew up down there, we hear the impact on the top. Boom! Totally different. That was the plane hitting the building on the top. Now, you have 2 different events, 2 separate events. An initial explosion on the basement and the plane on the top.
We've heard reports of secondary explosions after the aircraft impacted, whether in fact there wasn't something else at the base of the towers that in fact were the coup de grace to bring them to the ground.
Now, I worked in the building for 20 years. When you work in a place for so long, you know the difference of something coming from the bottom and something coming from the top very easily. The one from the top was very far away, and it oscillated the building so hard that the sprinkler system got activated. So now, what you have here is an initial event to create what I believe was that they didn't synchronize the situation really well, because by a couple of seconds they should have synchronized it with the same impact on the top. What I believe happened was that they were trying to bring the building down at the same time that it was hit by the plane. What I believe was that they wanted to weaken the base of the structure of the building for that to happen. When I went to verbalize again, something wrong is happening, a person came running into the office saying, explosion, 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 with the hands extended. A black person from Honduras, which I did not know, named Felipe David. Felipe David was a worker for a company called Aramark. It's a company that supplied the vending machines with sodas and with the candies, and he was in a closet on a B2 level when an explosion happened on the basement. And when he said explosion, his hands like this, I realized that something was hanging on his tip of the fingertips, and it was his skin. It was pulled from under the armpits all the way to the top of the fingertips, and it was hanging. I didn't know what it was. I thought it was clothing. It's like a glove when you take off a glove and let it hang. And I said, oh my God, what happened? And he said, the elevator, the elevator. He was standing by the elevator, and he put the hands to cover his face. Everybody saw this guy and started screaming. I said, we gotta get out. And I started pushing everybody out of the building. I put Mr. Felipe David, his arm around my shoulder, and I started pushing everybody and leading the way out of the building. The building where we were located was in the middle of what we call the loading dock. That was a big hill that you gotta go down on a truck to bring supplies to the building. So I gotta let everybody outside. Once we got outside, I stopped an ambulance, because an ambulance was coming already. I put Mr. Felipe David inside, and that's when I hear for the first time a plane hit the building. A plane hit the building on a security guard that was standing right next to the ambulance with a radio. When I look up, I saw the hole, I saw the fire, I saw the debris falling apart, and I said, oh my God, the people from Windows of the World. Because when I look up, when you are standing right on the bottom of a tall building, and you look up, you don't see the top of the building, because you know the illusion is this perpendicular thing that you don't see anything. And when I saw the smoke that was covering the antenna of the building, I said, my friends, oh my God, my friends. So I started screaming, we gotta go back, we gotta go back, we gotta go back. Nobody wanted to go back. The same supervisor from my company, my boss, that I pushed out of the building said, Rodriguez, you stay here, you're not going back in there.
Bomb in the building, start clearing out. Sorry, you said there's a bomb? What'd you say? A bomb in the building, start clearing out. Got it.
I said, no, I'm going back in. And I went running, took the radio from the security guard, went inside the building. Once I got on the basement again, went straight to the South Tower. After 1993, on the South Tower, they put what they called OCC, or the Operation Control Center, because of the bomb that happened on 1993. They spent $115 million to set up a security system to avoid a terrorist attack. When I get there, there was nobody there. It was empty, and that's where they have all the recorders, all the television cameras, feed from everything that is in the building. There was nobody there. I found two persons. One, Jimmy Barrett, that worked in the building, and he was located on the basement of the South Tower. Now, when he's in the basement of the South Tower, he didn't know what was happening. So that gives you an indication how many people probably died without ever knowing what was happening on the basement on the other tower. So I said, you gotta get out. And then I found a lady that worked for the security company for the Marriott Hotel. And I said, what are you doing? And she said, I heard everything, I heard everything. She said, get out. I said, I cannot leave. I said, why? She was a new employee in the building. She said, I'm afraid to be fired. So I said, you gotta get out now. And I said, now. And she left, and I went straight to the other tower, the North Tower, the one that I came from, and I only found one person. Mind you that there was water all over because the sprinkler system was throwing water. All you heard was shh. And this guy said, he worked for the recycling company, he said, I hear screams, I hear screams. There were 150 elevators in the whole complex of the World Trade Center. 150 elevators. So I put my ear in one of the freight elevators that went from the B1 level to the B6 level, and effectively there were two people stuck inside the elevator. One was Salvatore Giambanco, an Italian painter for the Port Authority, and a delivery guy, and they were screaming that they were going to drown. And that didn't make any sense. How can a person be drowning? And it was the water from the sprinkler system was going the elevator shaft, and they got encapsulated because the elevator lost power, and the reason that they lost power was that there was an explosion on the basement. They went into the elevator to protect themselves. When they went into the elevator, the doors closed, and they started going down, and all of a sudden they lost power, and they got stuck between two levels, the B2 and the B3 level. When they got stuck in there, all the water started coming from the top. And now it's a freight elevator, it's a reed system as for a ceiling. It's not a regular ceiling of an elevator. You can see through. And that happens, I said, oh my God, I started praying right away. And I was not a religious person, I was an agnostic. And I said for the first time, God help me. And I looked around and I found a pipe, a metal pipe. And I took it, and with the help of Mr. Barrett, we broke the door. It opened up. Once it opened up, there's nothing there because the elevator is all the way down. There's nothing I can do. So all of a sudden I said again, God help me. What can I do? Please help me. And it just came to my mind at that very moment that in the area where they had the garbage compactors, where they destroyed the garbage from the building, the electricians, they always have ladders that they put together so nobody will steal them and chain them against the steel that was there. Because it's the loading dock. People will go there with a truck and can put the ladders in there and steal them. So I said, please let me find one. Let me find one. And would you believe that the only one that I found unchained was the longest one of all of them. It was in chain. It was like it was there to save these people. So I took that ladder, dropped it into the elevator, went inside, opened it, got these two people out, took them outside the building, again from the loading dock, put them in an ambulance that was waiting outside, and went back inside the building. Everybody screaming again, don't go in, don't go in. I went in, I get to the middle again of the basement. I found just one person, Police Officer David Lim, an Oriental police officer in charge of the K9 unit of the World Trade Center, who told me, Willie, do you have the key? And I said, yes. He meant if I had the key, the master key. Because the police knew that there were only 5 master keys. He said, let's go. We get to the lobby, through the basement, we go up on the stairs. The building had 3 different stairs, A, B, and C. We go through the middle one, the B staircase, we get to the lobby. When we get to the lobby, the fire department is there waiting. They have something called the fire access key. That is a key that they put on the outside of the elevator, and if in emergency, the elevator will go down or will come up. And I said, there's no elevator, follow me, I know the best way. So they start following me. And now, the crucial thing about this key is that the building was a Class A building. A Class A building in New York is any skyscraper higher than 50 floors have to have a series of codification, which meant that 3 doors will not open, 1 will open, consecutively all the way to the top of the building. So, 3 doors will not open, 1 will open. Why would they do that? Because in a case of a fire, they have to contain that fire, maybe sacrifice a floor or 2 of people, but save the whole complex. Remember, the World Trade Center have 50,000 people working there every day, and close to 180,000 people went through the World Trade Center every single day because we have the train station right under the World Trade Center. Now, when you have this going on, we started going up the staircase. It was so difficult because they weren't big enough. I'll show you how wide the staircase were. It made it so difficult for the fire department, who had so much equipment in their back. We're talking about between 50 to 120 pounds of equipment, between the jaws of life, the machine that break doors and stuff like that. And what we tried to do was to go to every single floor and open the door so people could escape. As we were doing that, we heard explosions on the 3rd zone. The 3rd zone is from the 44th floor down to the 1st floor. Now, why would we hear explosion going in there? It doesn't make any sense.
As we were getting our gear on and making our way to the stairway, there was a heavy-duty explosion.
These are the stairwells. Not wide enough. You have people coming down, and you have us coming up with a unit of firemen. We kept bumping into each other. And you see?
It's this way, right?
Yeah. Not wide. As you see, no re-entry. Next re-entry, 3 floors above or 3 floors below. It was locked. So when you have this situation, people were trapped. Mind you that there were people stuck inside the elevators, of the passenger elevators, and if you tell me what is the biggest nightmare that you have from that day, is those people that I could not help. Because you could hear them screaming for help. And they would never had a chance. It was probably the most depressing event from the whole ordeal. So when I'm hearing these explosions going in different floors, I asked the firemen, what is that? And they said, I don't know, but I think it's the gas canisters from the gas tanks, from the kitchens. He said, the kitchens are all electrical. It's the code of the building. You cannot have a gas in the building like that. And we have something called the hazmat department, the hazardous materials, that don't allow you to put anything that is flammable anywhere, and they will check. So that didn't make any sense. I went up continuously up there. The moment that I get to the 21st floor, I was 3 floors above the firemen's, because I have no equipment in my back, I have no jacket, I have no equipment anti-fire. So of course, and I was doing the stairwells for so many years that I was in a better physical condition, because that was my job. That was my job. These poor people were so exhausted trying to make it up. When you go up 10 flights of stairs, you know how you feel. That your legs cannot contain you anymore and you are out of breath. Same thing, multiply that 3 times for those poor people. We get to the 27th floor. When we get to the 27th floor, everybody that was with me collapsed on the floor. On the corridor, you see these people taking off their equipment, their jackets, because they could not continue going up. It was impossible for them to continue. It was exhaustion beyond belief. And there I continue by myself. I go up to the 33rd floor. On the 33rd floor, when I go inside, I found a lady trembling on the floor with no shoes, in a state of shock, that did not know what to do in a matter of an emergency. And I said, come on. I put her on the stairwell where people coming down. I said, take her down, please. And I went back onto the 33rd floor. Now, on the 33rd floor, I heard something strange. I heard very heavy equipment being moved around on the 34th floor. Now, the 34th floor was an empty floor. There was nobody on that floor. There was no walls. There was no beautiful ceiling like this, because it was destroyed by construction, because the tenant moved 6 months before. So I knew for a fact there was nobody there. There was nothing, equipment there, and the elevators will not stop there because they were locked. So to hear that, I felt for the first time fear, because I knew something strange was going on down there. So I bypassed that floor. I continued to the 39th floor. On the 39th floor, we hear BAM! The impact on the other tower by the other plane. At that moment, Officer Lim has come up, and 2 other firemen has reunited with me in the middle of the floor, and it was so loud that you could hear the glass breaking apart, and all of a sudden we hear pa 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 pa. And on the radio we hear, we lost 65, we lost 65, meaning that the 65th floor went floor by floor by floor by floor, pancaking down on a domino effect up to the 44th floor. Something that you don't see from the outside video shots of all the media that was there. People didn't realize that the building had an internal huge collapse. And it was reported, but it was not expanded on that information nowhere. Everybody knows a little bit about it, but nobody investigated that. Now, with that internal collapse, I went crazy and I said, we gotta go up. Again, thinking about my friends on Windows of the World. And the police said, Willie, you've done enough, but you don't get paid for this. And you're still a civilian, you're my responsibility. Better if you help me with the person on the wheelchair down on the 27th floor and get out. And I didn't want to leave. And my belief was that these people don't know what they're doing because they don't know the building. I know the stairwells better than anybody. I want to be there. Again, the ignorance, but the ignorance because we never expected the towers to fall down. I thought from that point that was a separate event all the way to the top of the floors. There was a total disconnection for everybody that was there that incident on the top was going to affect anything else. Total disconnection. So I go running down to the 27th floor. I tell the firemen, I have orders to get this guy out right now. 3 firemen stood up. The person on the wheelchair was put on a rescue basket, and we start going down the stairwell, all 4 of us. And as we go down, it was like a scene from the movie Towering Inferno, exactly like that movie. Because as we go down, chunks of the building inside are going in different parts. And we were like protected by God because nothing was hitting us. But you could see the cracks on the walls, the holes that you could see right through it, and you could see the offices. We're talking about, we call it sheetrock, that separated with gypsum board, that separated the stairwells from the offices. Instead of having concrete walls that would have made it fireproof. And I can see right through the stairs to the offices. Now, we make it to the lobby. As we go down, we hear the collapse of the other tower. We don't know what it was. It sounded like a big thump. Boom. And it created a wave inside our building that the fluorescent lights shifted position because the building moved, that the holder started to break the light bulbs in line. You can hear clack, clack, clack. And the windows in the building breaking into pieces. Finally, we get to the lobby. When we get to the lobby, one of the firemen, there's 3 other firemen came running to give us a hand. One of them, Mr. Regenhardt, said, get the ambulance ready. And I go to the front of the building. When I get to the front of the building, there was no windows, there was no glass, everything was broken into pieces. When I get in the front, I hear for the first time, don't look back, don't look back. And it's the police who has the area a block and a half away cordon out so people will not go through, telling me not to look back. And when they tell you not to look back, what do?
Look back.
And that's exactly what I did. That's exactly what I did. It's a human nature. I turn around and, ladies and gentlemen, that's the bad thing, because that's when I looked down and I saw all the bodies of the people that jumped out of the building. They were like melted on the floor. They were totally disfigured. You couldn't recognize anybody that jumped out of the building. But at the same time, the worst memory is that that lady from the 33rd floor that I just picked and put it on the stairs so it could be helped to come out. When she came out, I found her cut in half because a glass came from the top of the building and like a guillotine cut it in half. So she never had a chance. And we're talking about seconds, not even seconds, fractions of a second. When I said that, I said, oh God, what is this? What's going on? And I hear, run, run, run. And like an earthquake, it felt like an earthquake because the floor below me started to move. I hear things starting to fall down. You don't have the building continuously falling down, but then you have this dust. Remember that huge cloud of dust, people running away from it? I was right there. I was receiving that dust, and all of a sudden I feel that I'm gonna die because my lungs are gonna explode internally. And luckily, across the street, filming was CNN and Global Vision from Brazil, and they say the last man out was there. You gotta start the rescue effort on that area, and that's how they started looking for me. Once I was pulled from the rubble, they found me. They found me during the whole process that the dust didn't disperse. That cloud stayed there for a long time. And I'm pulled out. I get first aid on an ambulance, which was just breathing on oxygen. Once I recover 15 minutes after, I go running back into the area to try to continue helping because I didn't break a bone. I was burned just on my side. I was burned under my eyes, but I did not break a bone. And I wanted to find out what was happening to the people. And the incredible thing is that the truck, for the first time, I realized that once they pull me out, the tires just blown out. So if those tires blow up while I was under the truck, I would be squashed to death. Remember that bridge that was between the World Trade Center and the World Financial Center? That collapsed on top of 4 trucks. And I went in and I saw 2 boots. I went under, I pulled the boots. I stayed with the boots in my hand, and when I look inside, I found the leg of one of the firemen. And I started screaming. That's when I lost it for the first time. Started screaming out of my lungs. All these people came over to try to help. And that's when I realized I gotta get out. I stayed in the area, then CNN called me, and I went nationwide and internationally, telling them exactly what I just told you right now, about the explosion, about the initial explosion in the basement, everything. That came out for 3 days on international news, and all of a sudden it disappeared. But they kept calling me for interviews. I became the leaders of the victims. They call me constantly for all kind of interviews, but they don't touch that. That's when we realized that something was wrong. And when they started creating this, they wanted to create this animosity right from the beginning for us against the Muslims. As a matter of fact, the 9/11 Commission, I testified behind closed doors. Remember, they have open hearings, televised. Mine was behind closed doors, and my testimony was totally omitted from the final report. It doesn't appear.
Why?
I made 22 people available to validate all these experiences, people that they have their own experiences. Felipe David survived. He was in a coma for 13 weeks. He was available, he survived. The painter survived. The 14 people that I pulled out survived. And everybody else that was on the basement on different areas that came out also survived, including firemen. And they asked for this to come out. It has been totally omitted and controlled. They don't want this information to come out because it destroyed the official version that the towers fell down because of the impact of two planes.
Okay. So what was your first thought on who could have been behind this? Did you believe the media? Did you believe President Bush when he said it was?
In the beginning, yes.
The Arabs?
I'll be honest with you. Yes, when he said this is what happened, because we still haven't gone through the whole process. We're talking about the first couple of days. In 3 days, this happened. All of a sudden, I talked to the FBI, and I told them my experiences, and you see, something very funny happened, because later on, like a week after, we find out that 5 Israelis were across the river with Arab clothing, filming and making noises. Oh, great, that's great, that happened, to create a diversion that it was Arabs who did it. Once that came out, I said, uh-oh, something is wrong. You see, and I have no experience. I learned 2 questions. And when this thing came out, and then we find out that these Israelis were turned over to the FBI, and the FBI sent them back to Israel because they were Mossad agents, I said, there's something more to this story. It doesn't make any sense. And that's when we started investigating and doing our own research. And we realized, again, because I was so in close contact with the 9/11 Commission, that I have access to experts. I have access to those experts.
So you found out that the Israelis, the 5 Israelis who actually camcorded that, weren't taken any actions against them?
No, they were sent to Israel. Yeah. And they said publicly from Israel that they were there documenting the event. And that was the right statement.
Ariel Sharon speaks best for himself. He spoke over Israel National Radio at one point and said, don't worry about the U.S. Congress. We control Congress. The other day we had a report in the Washington newspapers that the U.S. President and the Congress could not act until, on the issue of aid to the Palestinians, they could not act until they knew what the Israelis wanted. Now, this is quite frightening to me as an American, because here is my country, theoretically my country. Its policies are being dictated by another country.
Is it true that there are some Israelis or Jews who are working in the building who didn't show up for work on that day because they actually knew about it?
Okay, that is correct. I'm gonna set the record straight for you guys, because I've been asked this all over. We don't know how many. We know that SMS messages were sent to a specific group of people. We are suing under the Freedom of Information Act to have access to that evidence, and we have not been successful to know how many people. But remember, you have people that die from both sides. You got Muslims and Jewish that die. When we're not talking about specific
and Malays.
Malays, 92 countries were affected because of 9/11. But we don't know the exact amount of how many people were sent messages and by who not to go to work.
Also, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms didn't go to work that day, just like they didn't go to work the day of the Oklahoma City bombing.
They call it the ATF. We believe that this is an international crime, and under international crime jurisdiction court, when a country fails to do a thorough investigation for people that are not of their own nationality, you have jurisdiction to investigate what really happened. We have to have the coalition of the willing to get and unmask that this is all a lie. They used 9/11 to create a war against the Muslim world. Everybody knows that, but nobody's doing anything about it. We know it. We have been manipulated by the media because when we open our mouth, our statements in the United States are totally omitted. But I have more respect from places that I go all over the world that I get from over there. And I'm their media expert. Everything that Bush does right now is with the excuse because of 9/11. Everything on every speech is because of 9/11. And it got to the point I was never gonna thought myself involved in this kind of a struggle. But you know, when they use your pain and your suffering to create an agenda that you do not agree with, of course you have to open your mouth. We did the march against the war in New York for the war in Iraq, and we expected 10,000 people. We got 500,000 people, a 250,000 people, but probably 500,000 people. The press, on the report, they say it was like 30,000 people. And we use the same police techniques to count the people, you know, that they do the grid system. Same kind of amount of people. And so they lied, and they don't want people to complain about the war. They don't need people complaining about the war because it's just changes. It's our responsibility as American citizens. We are not Muslims, but we feel that it's a war against you, and why not us, which have more. They will, if you have a Muslim fighting for Islam, they will say, ah, of course. But when you have people like us coming and saying, you're wrong, that's not the way it is, that's not what they're teaching, then it creates a kind of an outreach that they cannot compete with.
Bush is just like Hitler. Hitler had the Reichstag fire, we had 9/11. Hitler blamed the Jews, Bush blames the Arabs. It's just the same. Hitler needed war after war to stay in power, Bush needs war after war to stay in power.
And why they call it war on terrorism? It's a war that will never end. Because once they finish in Iraq, they can go to Philippines. When they finish in Philippines, they can go anywhere. It's a never-ending war. And who profits from that? The industrial complex. The military, who makes weapons.
Halliburton is already setting up concentration camps in the United States.
So thank you very much. I hope that all the questions were answered. If you have individual questions that you want to do on the side, you're welcome to. We're going to be outside. So thank you again.
Thank you. I'm from the United States. I'm an American citizen, a Christian, living in exile in Austria. Self-imposed exile because in America, because I had anti-Bush signs on my car, it was attacked by a big rock this big. The police, the FBI refused to investigate. I was attacked on the streets of Santa Barbara. The police refused to come or investigate. I had gotten death threats by email and telephone calls. The police refused to investigate. This is my DVD called Confronting the Evidence, a call to reopen the 911 investigation. It's also in Malay now, thanks to this gentleman. Now, the lie started back in 1998, actually before, but it was actually written out in 1998 by an organization called the Project for a New American Century. In it, Wolfowitz, Cheney, Rumsfeld, Pearl, and a cast of characters, 25 total, most of which are in the present administration, or were at least, calling for a new Pearl Harbor to shock the American people into attacking Iraq. Spelled out. They wanted to attack Iraq for strategic purposes to project American military power. But without a new American Pearl Harbor, the American people won't allow it. They presented it to Clinton. Clinton had turned it down. Democrats were defeated in the next election. And lo and behold, 1 year later, we have a new Pearl Harbor. Now, maybe some of you aren't aware, but Pearl Harbor was the attack on Pearl Harbor by the Japanese in World War II was provoked by the United States when the United States cut off Japan's oil supplies. President Roosevelt we had broken the Japanese code. President Roosevelt knew the Japanese were on the way to attack Pearl Harbor. But the American people were 80% against entering World War II. So instead of stopping them, he didn't tell the people at Pearl Harbor. He ordered most of the good ships out and left some old ships, the older carriers, enough to be a token loss, and allowed the Japanese to murder 3,000 of our soldiers. Same number we've lost already. Same number that were killed at the World Trade Center. So when we say the new Pearl Harbor, we're saying that history here is repeating itself. Now there's a huge difference between the Japanese, who had the massacre of Nanking, who bayoneted the soldiers in their hospital beds in Hong Kong, forced the women into, what do they call them, comfort girls, comfort women, and the Nazis, who used forced labor and gas chambers to kill the Jews and other opponents, and what was happening in Iraq, the Middle East. Huge difference. Yet none of these people has been investigated. Here they are calling for a new Pearl Harbor, and it happens. Moreover, once you start examining the evidence, if you look at the buildings coming down, you can see an explosion on almost every floor as the building comes down. Some of the explosions way below the collapse level. What I'm saying is, this is the building's coming down, but you see explosions coming out down here. These are what are called cutter charges. They are a signature of pre-planned explosives. Many of the engineers reported molten steel in the basements of these buildings. Well, the maximum temperature that jet fuel can reach, or office contents, the furniture, etc., is 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. Structural steel melts at over 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit. Explosives can reach temperatures of 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Furthermore, Professor Stephen Jones, professor of physics at Brigham Young University in the United States, has examined some of the steel and found traces of a substance called thermite. Thermite is used by the military to destroy steel structures, tanks, because it reaches a temperature of around 3,000 degrees. The firemen who examined the buildings, the contents found that they found nothing whole. They only found a fine powdered dust. They didn't find any chairs, telephones, computers. Everything was reduced to a fine powdered. The only way this could have happened was explosives. Building 7 was a third, 47-story high skyscraper, a block and a half away from the World Trade Towers. In it, Mayor Giuliani, I call him Trader Giuliani, had a command center that had its own air supply, own water supply, own fuel supply, own electric supply. It was hermetically sealed. The perfect command post from which to set off the charges in the other two buildings. It was not hit by an airplane. It had only small fires. Yet, on that day, September 11th at 5:30, it collapsed straight down like a controlled demolition. The pictures of this were shown on national TV only on that day. To this day, they have not been shown on national TV because they don't want the American people to see it. Now, the laws of physics are such that a steel ball falling through air will take a certain amount of time to hit the ground. We compared the time it would take a steel ball to fall through the air and the time it took this building to collapse. And the building collapsed faster. Now you say, how can you go faster than the speed of gravity? Well, you can go faster than the speed of gravity if the explosives in the basement create a vacuum and it sucks the building down, adding to the speed of gravity. Somehow, on the day of 9/11, they knew immediately that Osama bin Laden had done it, when the day before they had no idea. What has happened here is we have had an effort to demonize the Arabs, demonize Islam. This demonization continues today. They continually mistranslate. Now, I'm not a huge supporter of the president of Iran. Let me put that right up here. I think they do a lot of things wrong. But he said he wanted to wipe the occupation off the map, not wipe Israel off the map. Yet, he's been continually translated as saying wipe Israel off the map. 2, the Mohammed cartoons. The Mohammed cartoons were printed in April of last year, last year, way ahead of the publishing in Denmark. They were published in Amsterdam ahead of the publishing in Denmark. The publisher, Fleming, is a Zionist. He refused to publish anti-Sharon cartoons and anti-Christian cartoons because he didn't want to offend people. This is a quote. Yet, he made the determination to print these. And then, 7 other newspapers across Europe printed them all on the same day. They said to support freedom of speech. Well, the cartoons were not new. They obviously conspired to do it on the same day. The cartoons, political cartoons in the United States, continually portray Arabs, including Osama, haven't seen any with Mohammed, but they continually publish pictures, caricatures of Arabs and Muslims as fanatics, which is all ridiculous, but it contributes to this phobia, this terror Americans have of Arabs and Muslims, and it does what we call dehumanizes them. By dehumanizing them, Americans can justify killing them in cold blood. It's very ironic to me that, and I'm not sure I think some of these people are being very misled by the imams. To me, the reading of the Quran says that you cannot kill innocent women and children no matter what. But nonetheless, a person who is willing to die, knows he's going to die, strap a bomb to his stomach or wherever and blow other people up, is a lot braver than a man that sits in an F-16 at 2,000 feet and launches a missile and that he knows is going to kill women and children. So, we cannot win this war. The Arabs are being miscast. But the thing that I also did this for, the biggest reason I'm doing this for, I want to stop the real terrorists. The real terrorists are Bush, Cheney, Rumsfeld, Wolfowitz, Pearl, and a cast of thousands who are in control of the United States. The Zionists who control the American news media, who suppress the information and stop them from attacking Iran, and stop them from doing another terrorist event in the United States. With all the anti-Arab, anti-Muslim information and anti-Iran information out there, 60% of Americans think Iran is a threat to the United States. This is the same thing that happened in the run-up to the Iraq War. We are now, quote, negotiating with Iran. We were negotiating with Iraq. when we had no intention of not fighting them. The war in Iraq was planned and the operation started 6 months ahead of the attack date. So you have to go to America, go to the West, take out advertisements, have speaking tours, go to the universities, and promote Islam, promote moderate Islam. Thank you.